Take a look at this speech by Bernie Sanders way back in 1992, calling out insane, out of control military spending.
Sometimes I think that the people in this institution and in the White House are really losing contact and not knowing what's going on with the American people. In case you don't know, and you haven't seen the latest polls, the American people hold the President of the United States in contempt. They hold this institution in contempt. They hold the Republican Party in contempt. They hold the Democratic Party in contempt. They think that maybe, given all of the crises facing this country, it's about time that there was some bold leadership here and that this institution made some hard choices. And this is what the choice is about. We are spending $270 billion a year on the military, but we don't have a major enemy. I know it hurts your feelings. I know you're upset about it. I know you're hoping and praying that maybe we'll have another war. Maybe somebody will rise up. But it ain't happening. The Soviet Union doesn't exist. The Warsaw Pact is through. Who you worried about? Iraq? Panama? Who you worried about? I'll tell you who I'm worried about. I'm worried about the fact that our workers are seeing a decline in their standard of living. They want to see our industry be rebuilt. That's what they want to see. No more B-2 bombers, no more Star Wars. Let's make the quality products we need. Let's invest in American industry. No, I won't yield. The American people want to see our kids educated. They want a Head Start program. They want their kids to be able to go to college. They want to wipe out the fact that 5 million children in this country go to bed hungry. They want child care for their kids. They want decent education. Let's have the guts to give some leadership to this country. The Cold War's over. Let's reinvest in America. Let's support this amendment.
That just gives me so much energy. While we were watching this, Edwin commented, I think that guy should be president. I'm thinking that too. That was incredible. Obviously, 100% true and appropriate and needed back in 1992, but it holds up better than any movie from 1992 does. I can guarantee that. Who are you worried about? Who are you worried about? And he lists, what are you worried about, Iraq? Well, they did eventually push for a war in Iraq. He said Panama, they kind of want one in Venezuela now. Like the same driving force that he identified back in 1992 that incensed him then, they did act on that. It still exists today. They still want to sell weapons. They still want to spend billions of dollars bombing Yemen or Syria or Afghanistan or God only knows where. The only thing that hasn't held up are the sheer numbers, because as bad as they were then, and he cited them, $270 billion a year, it is way, way higher than that, 3 times higher than that today, despite the fact that we still lack a major enemy. We still don't have anything approaching the enemies we've had back during World War II, the Cold War, even hypothetically then. And so he was right, he's even more right today. Let's talk a little bit about how they spend the money that they do, because these numbers are literally insane in every way. I just saw news yesterday that Trump is proposing, I guess it's good news, to cut the number of troops in Afghanistan down to less than 10,000. Because yes, today, like almost decades after we invaded, we still have 10,000 plus troops in Afghanistan. If you take a look at the numbers, let's take a look at this chart year by year. In 2011, 10 years after 9/11, we had 110,000 troops there. There are people serving in Afghanistan today that weren't born when the terror attack that was used as a justification for the invasion actually happened. And did you know that it costs a lot of money to have that many soldiers perpetually stationed in Afghanistan? Up until March of 2019, the total military expenditure in Afghanistan was $760 billion. Officially $760 billion. Now if, while they were making the case to invade Afghanistan, if they told you or your parents, whoever was making the decisions back then, we're gonna spend $760 billion, we're gonna have soldiers there for decades, might have been a different story, the level of support that they had for that war. And man, the machine just keeps chugging along. This year, the Trump administration proposed $750 billion in official defense spending as part of its budget, as well as steep cuts to domestic programs in healthcare and education. I mean, you can't afford those things if you're gonna put all your money into defense, I guess. But honestly, on the other side, it's not that much better. The House Democrats, they responded with $733 billion a year, an increase in line with inflation in support for increases in domestic spending. So look, that side is good, but the House Democrats are still approving, hypothetically, $733 billion. What are we fighting? Martians? I mean, what, like futuristic Nazis? I mean, politically, yeah. But we're not fighting those things here. We're not engaged in massive wars around the world. There is no justification for the level of defense spending, but there is an explanation for the level of defense spending, and that has to do with lobbyists. Raytheon Chief Executive Thomas Kennedy said, "The world is still a very dangerous place. Dangerous perhaps, but not for corporate profits." His company received $27 billion in sales of military technology just last year. And he said, "I know the Democrats and Republicans that I talk to recognize that." Well, I'm sure they do. After all, some of those $27 billion are gonna be sent back to them as checks, campaign finance. And look, it's one thing to focus on one executive, but if you take a look at the industry as a whole, the defense sector has spent a total of more than $1 billion on lobbying since 2009, employing between 700 to 1,000 lobbyists in any given year, which means that for all of our elected officials, senators and representatives, they're actually outnumbered by lobbyists for just the defense sector. Okay, they've been flanked on all sides, they're surrounded. That's the true military situation that we should be worried about. Yeah, it's just insane, and I know, look, obviously there's a lot of jobs in this defense spending. Hell, there's 1,000 lobbying jobs, and they'll always say, you know what, yes, we spend a lot of money, but it generates a lot of jobs. It does, but what if the money was put somewhere else? In 2011, a study by economists from the University of Massachusetts made this blindingly clear, saying military spending is the worst way to create jobs, putting the same money into any other area, from infrastructure to transportation to alternative energy to healthcare or education, creates up to twice as many jobs as military spending does. So look, if you're not convinced by the fact that when we buy these bombs, we feel a need to use these bombs, and that results in people dying around the globe needlessly, if that doesn't convince you, for humanitarian or empathy, if those sorts of concerns don't affect you, it's also incredibly wasteful pragmatically. It's good for the lobbyists, it's good for Raytheon and Boeing and Lockheed Martin and all of that, but in terms of its effect on the economy, it could be better spent randomly. Just use your expensive military technology, your planes, to drop the money over a major city, and you'll have a better economic return than what you get when you send it to these companies. And I want to give you just a couple of standout examples of how wasteful this spending actually is. Do you know the Future Combat System? You probably haven't heard of it. It hasn't been talked about in the media for a long time. It was multiple systems, one of which was, what they wanted to do was they wanted to have a way for a tank traveling up to like 30 or 40 kilometers an hour to shoot multiple shells at different trajectories so they all land at the same time on a target. Really impressive, right? I mean, how could they make that work? They couldn't, but it did take $19 billion in research before they figured out that they couldn't make it work. $19 billion. That's like a quarter of a year of public education for all Americans. We put it into a program there's a good chance you never even heard of. The Star Wars program back in the 80s, you hear jokes about that every once in a while. Stephen Colbert will make a joke about it. You know what's not a joke? The amount of money they actually spent on it. We honestly don't even know how much, but we believe it's between $100 and $150 billion were spent on that program that is now, at best, a punchline in late night TV shows. But that number, as high as that is, that's nothing compared to some of the biggest programs that are still ongoing. The F-35 Lightning II, really impressive, technologically advanced plane. It is believed that since 1996, that program alone, they've spent $1.5 trillion on it. And look, that, like, you almost have to laugh at that amount. I mean, trillions. You could have gotten a tax cut for the wealthy for $1.5 trillion. So when they talk about climate change and how we can't afford it, just think of the Lightning II. What's most ironic about that plane is for $1.5 trillion, you'd think we could invade another galaxy with that technology, but no. It's actually plagued with any number of issues. It was considered outdated when they finally rolled it off the assembly line. In tests against planes that we've had for decades, it actually loses in dogfights. Apparently has a big problem, the Lightning II, with being struck by lightning, ironically enough, as if God himself is mocking us for our hubris. $1.5 trillion. Now, we should be talking about these numbers. We should be talking about the fact that the Pentagon buried an internal study that exposed $125 billion in administrative waste because it thought Congress might use that as an excuse to cut the defense budget, which is both insulting and corrupt, but also laughable because there's no chance the current Congress is gonna cut defense spending no matter what study you find. Look, these numbers are crazy. We need to continue talking about them, but thank God we have people like Bernie Sanders in office who've been talking about it for literally decades. Back for when I was born, he was talking about this issue and he continues to. We would be very lucky to have him in charge of this budget. So we'll be looking out for that. Anyway, crazy numbers. Oh boy.
Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.